I remember the day so clearly. It was a Tuesday late in February, right in the brutal heart of busy season at our audit firm office. If you've ever worked at a big accounting or finance place, you know what that means. Fluorescent lights at 10 p.m., microwave dinners at 1 a.m., and a constant, low-grade thrum of existential dread mixed with caffeine. My name is Layla, and I thought I had a pretty good handle on the chaos. I knew who was dating who was about to quit, and most importantly, who was reliable. I thought I knew Sarah. Sarah was my cubicle neighbor, and honestly, my only real lifeline in that soul-crushing environment. She was one of those people who just radiated warmth, even when she was staring down a 1,000-page general ledger. She always brought in homemade cookies, always had an extra Advil, and she was fiercely devoted to her husband, Mark. Mark used to work at the firm too. He was in the tax department a few floors up before he took a role at a smaller boutique firm a year ago. Everyone loved Mark. He was the kind of guy who remembered your dog's name and always had a cheesy joke ready. The picture of the perfect corporate spouse. But lately, something had been off. Sarah was twitchy. She was snapping at the copier, forgetting important deadlines, and spending way too much time staring blankly at her monitor. I chalked it up to busy season stress, but there was this undercurrent of defensiveness that was new. She was always on edge, like she was waiting for a landmine to explode. The argument itself wasn't supposed to involve me. I was just walking toward the break room, desperately needing to replenish my sad, lukewarm cup of coffee, when I heard the raised voices. Our break room is tucked away in a corner of the 14th floor, and the door was slightly ajar. I could immediately tell it was Sarah and, to my surprise, Mark. What was Mark even doing here? He hadn't worked here in months. My first thought was, oh, he probably just swung by to bring her dinner. That's what perfect corporate spouses do, right? But the sound was too sharp for a casual drop-off. It was the kind of tense, low-volume fury that's scarier than shouting. I stopped dead in the hallway, pressed against the wall, immediately feeling that gross sense of invading privacy, but also knowing I couldn't just walk in on a fight this serious. And then I heard it, the words that stopped my heart. You can't keep doing this, Mark. It's not sustainable. Layla's going to find out. Sarah's voice was tight, thin, and stretched to its breaking point. Layla, that's me. My brain stalled. Find out what? I hadn't done anything. I wasn't even aware I was supposed to know anything. A flash of pure, cold panic shot through me. Had I messed up a shared work project? Had I accidentally spilled a secret? Mark's response was a low, aggressive rumble. Keep your voice down. And what's she going to find out? She's the reason I have to stay late, isn't she? We've been over this. No, she's not the reason. You are making up this entire ridiculous narrative about needing her data, or needing her sign-off, or needing her cover. She's just a name you throw out because you think she's too oblivious to ever question it. I remember thinking, oblivious? Me? The irony was suffocating. I was literally standing 3 feet away, not oblivious at all, hearing every devastating word. This wasn't about a late work project. This was a cover story. A massive, complex lie, and my name was the key ingredient. My reliable, workaholic image, the one I'd painstakingly cultivated to survive in this firm, was being used as a human shield by a guy I barely spoke to anymore. The wave of nausea that hit me was physical. It wasn't just a regular workplace scandal. This was a direct, personal violation. Mark hadn't just been lying to Sarah. He'd been using me as the proof of his fidelity, painting a picture of me as his unwitting co-conspirator. My late nights, which were truly just me staring at spreadsheets, were being repurposed as his excuses for God knows what. I stood there, frozen, listening to the destruction of a marriage that was built, in part, on a lie involving me. And I had a sickening feeling that the argument wasn't even about Sarah's fear of my finding out about his lies, but about her fear of my finding out that she was fully aware of the lie and had been protecting it. It made me rewind the last few months in my head. All those times, Sarah had vehemently shut down whispers about my long hours. All those times she jumped to my defense when anyone joked about me living at the office. It wasn't just loyalty to a coworker, it was a desperate, aggressive defense of a lie she was trapped in. Before I took the next step, before I walked into that room and blew up everything, I need to know something from you. Drop a comment below right now and tell me the time and place you are watching this video. Are you watching this at home on your couch at 3 p.m., or maybe you're sneaking this on your phone at your own soul-crushing office? Let me know. I took a deep breath, the smell of burnt popcorn and stale coffee filling my lungs. I reached for the door handle. I couldn't just leave. I couldn't unhear what I had just heard. I had to know the full extent of the damage, and frankly, I felt an almost protective surge of anger towards Sarah. She was my friend, and she was being played. Or, worse, she was playing along. Either way, the perfect little world of Layla and Sarah, the audit survivors, was about to shatter into a million pieces. That moment I heard my name, Layla, being thrown around like an excuse, was the key that unlocked months of subtle weirdness I had been dismissing. Sarah and we were the ultimate office pair. We started at the firm around the same time, we suffered through the brutal CPA exams together, and we developed that specific, dark sense of humor that only people surviving an audit firm can share. Our setting was pure corporate jungle, glass walls, endless cubes, and the sort of high-stakes, low-glamour work that somehow determines the fate of major companies. Sarah was slightly older than me, maybe 32, with a kind of maternal energy that manifested as organizing our shared snack drawer and aggressively defending the temperature settings. She was sharp, a brilliant auditor, but her defining characteristic, the one everyone knew about, was her unshakable devotion to Mark. They were high school sweethearts, college sweethearts, and now they were corporate sweethearts, even after he moved firms. Their love story was the office gold standard, the one that made you think maybe, just maybe, you could find happiness outside of a pivot table. The way she talked about Mark was almost a full-time job. Everything she did was framed around him. Oh, I can't stay past 7 tonight. Mark and I are finally trying that new Thai place. Or, Mark helped me with my presentation. He's so good at boiling down the key points. It was lovely, if a little repetitive, and it made her immensely popular. She was relatable because she was juggling the high-pressure career with this seemingly perfect home life. But I started noticing the small, almost imperceptible cracks around Christmas time. She'd call him, and instead of the usual cute banter, she'd get this pinched look on her face. Her side of the conversation would sound like an interrogation. "No, where are you? That doesn't sound like the office." Or, "Did you remember to text me when you left?" She would always cover it up immediately with a bright, fake laugh, saying, "Oh, Mark's just being Mark, you know, totally distracted." But I didn't know. It felt less like a distraction and more like a necessary defense. One day, I remember, we were working a particularly gruesome 16-hour shift. I was practically incoherent, trying to reconcile a bank statement from 2019. Sarah was staring into the middle distance. I made a bad joke about quitting and becoming a goat farmer. She didn't even smile. Instead, she just sighed, a deep, rattling sound, and said, "God, I just wish Mark would come home at a reasonable hour, even just once." I was confused. "Doesn't he? He works at that smaller place now. They're supposed to have better hours." She stiffened immediately. That defensive wall shot straight up. "Oh no, he does. I mean, he's just so dedicated to his clients. You know how it is, Layla. You're always here late, too. You get it. It's the professional ethic." And that was the emotional connection she used. She always brought up my long hours to normalize his absences. She made it feel like we were in the same boat, two overworked women who understood the demands of a high-power husband or a high-pressure job. I didn't have a high-power husband, just a high-pressure job, but I bought the connection anyway because I trusted her. She was my friend. Why would she lie? This pattern repeated itself. Anytime anyone brought up how late Mark seemed to be working, Sarah would immediately pivot and bring up one of my recent late nights. "It's just like Layla," she'd say. She was here until 3 a.m. finishing the Johnson file. That's just the cost of excellence, right? She wasn't just defending Mark. She was using my professional grind, my reputation for obsessive dedication, as the benchmark for his dedication. And I, totally oblivious, took it as a compliment. Wow, Sarah really respects my work ethic, I used to think. It built a profound sense of trust, a deep-seated belief that she and I were on the same side, against the chaotic world of audit deadlines. We had this silent, shared understanding of what it took to succeed. It was a beautiful, small, Relatable moment of female solidarity in a hostile corporate environment. But now, standing outside that break room, hearing Mark admit to using my name and Sarah confessing her fear of me finding out, I realized that solidarity was a sham. It was a calculated performance. She didn't just understand my long hours, she had been meticulously tracking them, weaponizing them, and weaving them into the tapestry of Mark's deceit. The emotional connection wasn't a bond of friendship, it was the rope she was using to pull herself and Mark out of trouble. And I, the reliable, overworked Layla, was the perfect, unsuspecting stooge for their cover story. It was a betrayal layered so deep, I couldn't even see the bottom. The cookies, the Advil, the dark humor, it was all coated in the same, sticky layer of deception. And that made the whole experience exponentially more painful than a simple office rumor. The immediate aftermath of overhearing my name in that fight was a full body system failure, like a circuit breaker tripping. The simple, vague rumors of late nights that had been floating around our department over the last few months suddenly snapped into sharp, sinister focus. Before that moment in the hallway, they had been just background noise, the kind of insignificant office chatter you dismiss because it doesn't actually affect your bottom line, or so I thought. The weird thing about office rumors, especially in a place as intense as a Big Four adjacent audit firm, is that they never stick to the actual facts. They get mutated, amplified, and personalized. The rumors about me weren't even about me directly, they were about my availability. It started subtly. A manager, Brian, would pass by my cube around 8 p.m., see me still slogging away and say, "Still here, Layla? You're going to burn out, kid. I heard you were here until 1 a.m. again on the Henderson file." And I'd shrug. Yeah, that one was a beast. You know how it is. Totally normal interaction. But then, a few weeks later, another coworker, David, would stop me by the printer and, with a knowing, slightly sleazy smirk, say, "Wow, those are some long hours, Layla. Are you and Mark from tax still pulling all-nighters on that special project?" That was the first time I heard my name and Mark's name linked in that way. I was confused because Mark hadn't worked here in almost a year, and I certainly hadn't seen him. I'd reply, "Mark? No, he left months ago. I'm just buried in Q4 filings." David would just give a non-committal. "Oh, sure," and walk away, leaving a faint scent of suspicion lingering behind him. I remembered asking Sarah about it once. This was maybe a month before the break room incident. I told her David's weird comment. He asked if I was working late with Mark. I said, leaning back in my chair. It was super awkward. Why would he assume that? Sarah's reaction was immediate and disproportionate. She slammed her pen down on her desk, making me jump. "Oh, God, Layla, don't even listen to David. That guy's a total gossip. He just can't handle how dedicated you are. He's probably jealous because his wife would kill him if he stayed late on a special project." She put a protective, almost aggressive spin on it. She turned the rumor from a simple factual error, "Mark doesn't work here," into a moral judgment on the office's less dedicated employees. She made it my problem, a testament to my dedication. And she always brought it back to Mark. "People see you and Mark as the gold standard for commitment," she'd say. "They see you both working relentlessly, and they assume you must be working together. It's a compliment, even if it's annoying." The crucial layer I missed was that she wasn't denying the late nights rumor. She was reinforcing it by legitimizing the reason for it, professional excellence and an unspoken, high-level, secret project that required the best, Mark and me. Now, listening to Mark confess that he was using my name as an excuse for every late night he had, I realized the terrifying geometry of the lie. The rumors weren't a result of David's malicious gossip. The rumors were planted. Mark, knowing I was a notorious workaholic who genuinely was at the office until 1 a.m. sometimes, had clearly been feeding Sarah these stories to cover his tracks. But the stories had to make sense. He couldn't just say, "I'm staying late." He had to say, "Layla and I are stuck reconciling the foreign subsidiary accounts." He used specifics that he knew would sound believable in our world of technical audit jargon. And Sarah, she was the one who was taking these believable lies and broadcasting them, not to spread the gossip, but to control the narrative. She didn't want the truth to come out, so she was aggressively over-explaining the Mark/Layla dynamic to everyone who whispered. She was the unwitting, or maybe even witting, PR manager for his infidelity. It makes me physically cringe now, thinking about all the times I was just trying to get my work done, and my name was being passed around as the shield for someone else's infidelity. The layer of deceit wasn't just Mark lying to Sarah, it was Mark lying to Sarah about me, and Sarah essentially lying to me by creating this false sense of camaraderie and shared work burden, all to protect the central, rotten core of their marriage. That realization made the floor feel like it was tilting beneath me. I wasn't just a coworker. I was a prop in a long-running, deeply corrosive play. The sheer, blinding irony of the situation was that Sarah's fierce defense mechanism was the very thing that made me trust her absolutely. Her loyalty wasn't just confined to Mark. She was loyal to me, or so I believed. She always had my back in the office. If a partner questioned my methodology, Sarah would swoop in with perfectly detailed supporting documentation before I even had a chance to open my mouth. If I was swamped, she'd stay an extra hour just to listen to me vent, even if her own deadlines were looming. She made me feel seen and supported in an environment that usually specialized in making you feel invisible and disposable. This aggressive defense of Mark's late nights always felt like an extension of that same loyalty. When David or anyone else raised a skeptical eyebrow about my professional dedication being intertwined with Mark's, Sarah didn't just casually dismiss the gossip. She went on the offensive. I remember this specific meeting in early January. We were in a small conference room with a few mid-level managers. The conversation drifted to how burned out everyone was. One manager, Tom, casually remarked, "I don't know how Layla does it. I see her car here at 10 p.m. most nights. You gotta have a pretty understanding partner to keep that pace up." Sarah, who had been quietly taking notes, snapped her head up. "It's not about an understanding partner, Tom, it's about a shared understanding of professional commitment. Layla is a rock star. And quite frankly, so is Mark. They are working on extremely complex, sensitive files. We should be admiring their dedication, not suggesting their personal lives are being neglected. That kind of commitment is rare, especially around here." Her delivery was perfect, assertive, slightly scolding, and framed in the language of corporate ethics. It made Tom immediately backtrack and apologize. I remember feeling a genuine surge of gratitude towards Sarah right then. Wow, I thought, she really gets it. She's defending my professional reputation. But now, in the hallway outside the break room, Mark's voice ringing in my ears, "She's the reason I have to stay late." I realized her defense was actually an elaborate, proactive cover-up. She wasn't defending me. She was defending the lie that used me as its primary anchor. Every time she passionately defended my professionalism and linked it to Mark's supposed workload, she was strengthening the foundation of his alibi. She was making the lie impenetrable by weaving it into my verifiable reality. She knew I was staying late. She saw my emails sent at 2 a.m. She knew I had no personal life outside of work during busy season. I was the perfect, irrefutable source of truth that validated his fiction. When Mark told her, "I'm with Layla, we're stuck on the international tax file," Sarah could then go to the office and see my desk dark at 9 p.m. and rationalize it by saying, "Well, she's probably just on the 10th floor with Mark's team, or they must be meeting off-site." My very existence in the office was her proof that he was dedicated, not deceitful. What makes this kind of betrayal so devastating isn't just the lie itself, but the way it twists your genuine emotions. I had invested emotional currency into this friendship. I genuinely admired her loyalty, and now I saw that loyalty was a deeply manipulative tool. She made me feel special, understood, and defended, all while secretly making me the central, unwitting accessory to her husband's infidelity. The moral conflict I faced was immediate. Was Sarah a victim, so blinded by love and fear that she was forced to participate in the lie? Or was she a co-conspirator, actively helping Mark maintain his double life because the alternative, confronting the truth, was too terrifying? Her aggressive defense mechanism suggested the latter. Victims usually retreat. They don't go on the attack, especially not with such well-reasoned, work-specific defenses. The complexity of her maneuvers hinted at a deep, desperate awareness. The thought of her standing up for me, challenging managers on my behalf, all while knowing she was using my name to protect a cheating husband, felt like a slap in the face. It made all those shared moments, the bad coffee, the late-night talks, the promises of friendship after the busy season ended, feel contaminated. Her fierce loyalty, which I cherished, was a performance designed to keep her secret safe. It wasn't about our friendship. It was about her survival in a marriage she was desperately trying to keep intact, even if it meant sacrificing my reputation in the process. The layered conflict wasn't just Mark's betrayal, it was Sarah's desperate participation, and the catalyst that finally shattered the whole fragile structure was something unbelievably simple: the lunch date that didn't happen. In the world of audit, lunch is a sacred, often missed ritual. We usually ate sad desk salads, but sometimes, during a lull, Sarah and I would treat ourselves. A few weeks before the break room explosion, I had been under an immense amount of pressure trying to close out a client engagement early. I hadn't seen the sun in days, let alone left the office before midnight. Sarah, seeing my misery, offered a lifeline. "Layla, you need a break," she insisted, leaning over my cube wall. "We are going out for proper tacos today. No excuses. I'm driving." I genuinely appreciated the gesture. "Oh my God, Sarah, that would be amazing. I'm almost done inputting these foreign exchange adjustments. Give me 30 minutes, tops, and I'm yours." She smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile that reached her eyes. "Perfect. I'll email Mark to let him know I'm taking a real lunch. You meet me by the elevator in half an hour." I nodded, feeling a little lift in my mood. I rushed through the adjustments, saved my work, and grabbed my coat, practically skipping to the elevator bank. I waited 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then, I pulled out my phone and texted her, "Taco time. Where are you?" A minute later, a text came back. It wasn't Sarah. It was Mark. "Hey Layla, this is Mark. Sarah's in a meeting and just asked me to text you. She had to jump on a last-minute call with the New York team about the international file. She's so sorry, but she wanted me to tell you she absolutely has to reschedule. Can you do tomorrow?" I remember staring at the text, the warmth of a taco fantasy draining right out of me. It was strange. Why would Mark be texting me? Sarah had her phone right there. And why did he specify the international file? A file I knew I was managing, but one that had absolutely nothing to do with Sarah's daily tasks, and certainly nothing to do with Mark's current firm. I texted back, "No worries, Mark. Tomorrow sounds great. Tell Sarah not to stress." I went back to my desk, feeling deflated. The next day, the tacos never materialized either. Sarah was suddenly swamped with partner review comments. I chalked it up to busy season chaos, but the exchange with Mark stuck with me. The true significance of that missed lunch only became horrifyingly clear when I listened to the argument in the break room. Mark's use of the phrase international file, which I knew was technically correct for my current workload, wasn't a coincidence. It was a premeditated defense. I realized what had happened. When Sarah messaged Mark to say she was leaving the office for lunch with me, it must have sent him into a frantic panic. If she was with me at lunch, she wasn't at her desk and he couldn't call her. More importantly, he couldn't use her absence as an excuse for his own lunchtime activities. If she was with me, then I couldn't be the reason he was working late or the person he was meeting with. My presence with Sarah would have demolished his carefully constructed alibi for that day. Mark had intercepted the plan, likely by calling her the moment she stepped away to get her coat, and had forced her to cancel. He took control of the narrative, using my phone number, which he must have had saved, to proactively send the text. He killed the lunch date, ensuring Sarah stayed at her desk, and then used the highly specific, work-related excuse, the one about the international file, to reinforce the fabricated professional connection between us. He was managing his lies with the precision of a master project planner. Sarah, whether willingly or under duress, became the operative. She had to rush back to her desk and pretend to be on a call with the New York team. She had to let Mark's text stand, even though she knew it was partially a lie. Her genuine desire to have tacos with her friend was hijacked and weaponized to protect Mark's secrets. This non-event, this simple missed taco date, became the subtle pressure point that began to crack their whole system. It was the moment Sarah had to choose between being a friend and being Mark's accomplice, and in that split second, she chose Mark. The realization that my friend had been maneuvering me like a chess piece to save her husband's skin, right down to intercepting our lunch plans, was a brutal wake-up call. It was a powerful, chilling demonstration of how deeply entrenched they were in the lie, and how easily they would sacrifice me to preserve it. The tension was already at a boiling point from the small, cumulative lies, but everything was about to detonate because of the stress of busy season cracks. If you haven't lived through it, you can't imagine the pressure cooker that is January through March in an audit firm. It's not just long hours, it's the constant, high-stakes knowledge that one misplaced decimal point could cost a client millions, or worse, cost you your job. Everyone is operating on minimal sleep, excessive caffeine, and raw, frayed nerves. In this environment, people's usual emotional control simply dissolves. Normally, Sarah was unflappable. She had that steely, calm demeanor that made her a fantastic manager. But the combination of the professional pressure and the immense personal pressure of Mark's ongoing deception had pushed her past her breaking point. The cracks were showing in how she interacted with everyone, especially Mark. I remember watching her take a call from him one afternoon, maybe a week before I overheard the argument. She stepped away from her desk, which was a red flag in itself. She usually didn't care who heard her calls. She was pacing near the window, her back to me, and her voice was a low, tight whisper, but the intensity was unmistakable. "No, Mark, I can't cover for you again. I told the partner I needed to review Layla's data myself before sign-off. If they see me here and you're not, that excuse is going to look flimsy." She was whispering, but the words were loud enough for me to catch key phrases. Cover for you, flimsy excuse, and of course, Layla's data. My data, the files I was actually working on, the legitimate late-night projects, were being used as the precise alibi for his imaginary work. I watched her run a hand through her hair, a gesture of absolute defeat, before she hissed, "Just get home. I don't care about the dinner, I care about the lie," and abruptly hung up. I pretended not to notice when she returned to her desk, her face pale. I assumed it was just a typical marital spat exacerbated by the stress. I thought, Mark is probably stressed about his new job, and Sarah is stressed about our current project. I connected it all back to the firm's demands, which is exactly what Sarah wanted me to do. The firm, the all-consuming monster, was the perfect scapegoat for all their problems. But the sheer level of fatigue and emotional exhaustion meant that Sarah couldn't maintain her fierce defense mechanism anymore. She stopped aggressively challenging the rumors. Instead, she just retreated, becoming quiet and withdrawn. Her usual coping mechanisms, the baking, the Advil sharing, the dark jokes, vanished. She was just a shell, running on fumes, waiting for the busy season to end, or perhaps waiting for the truth to catch up to her. The environment itself became a character in the conflict. The office felt heavy, airless, and unforgiving. Everyone was looking for a distraction, a release valve. The tension was palpable. You could practically cut it with a stale breadstick. This elevated, high-pressure atmosphere meant that when Mark showed up at the office, which he must have done to deliver something, or perhaps just to re-establish his presence to Sarah's colleagues, the inevitable fight had a stage already set for a huge, dramatic blow-up. He probably thought he could just smoothly deliver a meal, give Sarah a quick peck on the cheek, and reinforce his image as the dutiful, hard-working husband. But Sarah, running on 3 hours of sleep and facing a week of imminent partner reviews, didn't have the energy to maintain the performance. The stress of the audit firm's busy season, which breaks down logic and elevates emotion, was the ultimate variable. It had worn Sarah down so completely that she couldn't whisper her fear into her phone anymore. She had to scream it into the break room, even with the door ajar. The way they were arguing, the controlled rage, the use of specifics like my name and my projects, showed a relationship that wasn't just struggling, it was actively rotting from the inside out. And the timing was everything. Any other time of year, Sarah might have swallowed her fear, kept the argument behind closed doors, or even maintained enough self-control to avoid uttering my name. But the immense, grinding pressure of busy season meant the usual filters were gone. Her fatigue made her reckless, and her recklessness led to the crucial, devastating scene in the break room. The audit firm office, the scene of our shared professional survival, became the perfect, terrible place for her personal destruction. I finally decided I couldn't just stand there, a silent witness to my own betrayal. I pushed the break room door open, not dramatically, but with enough force that the quiet click of a latch echoed in the tense silence. Finding my name in the argument was the ultimate shock, but walking in on it was the moment of full, horrifying realization. Sarah and Mark both froze. Sarah was leaning against the counter by the sink, her eyes red and puffy, clutching a crumpled tissue. Mark was standing over her, his hands balled into fists, his face a mask of thwarted aggression. They looked like two criminals caught mid-heist, their argument instantly stopping, replaced by the white, blinding shock of discovery. The silence was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It stretched, taut and agonizing, for what felt like an hour but was probably only 3 seconds. I didn't say anything immediately. I just let my eyes travel from Mark's face, the man who had been using my reputation as his personal alibi, to Sarah's face, the woman who had been my friend, my defender, and my unwitting handler in this elaborate fraud. Mark was the first to recover, and his recovery was telling. It wasn't an apology or a stammered explanation. It was a lie, deployed instantly, honed through months of practice. "Layla! Hey! Wow, didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. He plastered on his old, corporate-friendly smile, the one that made him everyone's favorite guy in tax. "Just dropped off some takeout for Sarah. She's been stressing about your Q4 filings, and I was just telling her to stop worrying. You know how she is, always taking ownership of everyone's workload." He was still trying to use me. In that moment, he was trying to gaslight all three of us, himself, Sarah, and me, by twisting the argument I had just overheard into a concern about my workload. But I had heard the venom in Sarah's voice minutes before. I had heard him explicitly say, "She's the reason I have to stay late." I wasn't going to let him turn this back into a conversation about spreadsheets. "The Q4 filings are fine, Mark," I said, my voice unnervingly calm, a direct contrast to the frantic energy in the room. I walked further into the room, past the microwave, and stopped maybe 5 feet away from them. I wasn't confronting them about his affair, that was their marriage. I was confronting them about the use of my name. "I just walked up the hall," I continued, never breaking eye contact with Mark. "And I heard you tell Sarah that I am the reason you have to stay late. And then I heard Sarah say that you are using my name as an excuse for every late night you have." The corporate smile slipped right off Mark's face. It was replaced by a kind of panicked fury. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. He just shot a look of pure, cold betrayal at Sarah, the kind that clearly said, "You let her hear that? You risked everything." Sarah, meanwhile, had sunk further against the counter, her eyes widening, tears now streaming down her cheeks. She looked utterly demolished. This wasn't the aggressive, defensive Sarah I knew. This was a woman who had just watched the floor drop out from under her life. "Mark, you told me that Layla was your new contact person for the cross-divisional restructuring project," I said, speaking directly to him, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry through the closed door. "You told Sarah that you needed my sign-off every time you had to skip dinner. You used my name, my actual, verified, 2 a.m. at my desk work life, to give weight to your lies." He scoffed, trying one last-ditch attempt at deflection. "It's just an office white lie, Layla. It's what everyone does during busy season to keep their wives from freaking out. It doesn't mean anything. It was convenient. Convenient," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Convenient for your deception. Did you think about the convenience for me when David was asking me about the special project I was working on with you? Did you think about the convenience when Sarah was aggressively defending my work ethic to our managers, all to build an airtight alibi for your whereabouts? You didn't just lie to your wife, Mark. You used my professional reputation as camouflage. That's not a white lie, that's a professional ethics violation and a deep personal betrayal." It was the ethical side that seemed to hit him hardest. In our world, you can forgive personal mistakes, but professional misconduct is career death. He finally looked less angry and more scared. He knew he was caught, not just as a cheating husband, but as a manipulative coworker who had dragged an innocent party into his mess. Sarah let out a small, broken sob. The weight of his lie, and her participation in it, had finally crushed her. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at me, and in her eyes, I saw not just guilt, but an agonizing sorrow that went beyond the destruction of her marriage. She was sorry, deeply sorry, that she had compromised our friendship and used me as a shield. The tension in the break room was so thick you could almost see it shimmering under the fluorescent lights. The silence after I finished speaking, after I dropped the corporate ethics bomb, was heavy with the weight of the undeniable. This was the moment of the bitter, ugly truth revealed, and it was far worse than a simple cheating scandal. It was an elaborate infrastructure of lies built entirely on my professional life. Mark, recovering from the initial shock, attempted to regain control, not with an apology, but with a petty attack on Sarah. "This is ridiculous, Sarah. You know exactly why I had to do this. You wouldn't just listen. You wouldn't trust me. I told you, my new firm's culture is intense, they expect those hours. And I needed to make sure you didn't keep calling my work phone every 5 minutes demanding I leave a critical project." He wasn't defending his affair, he was defending his methodology. His need to justify the lie, even when exposed, confirmed everything. It wasn't about a demanding project at his new firm. It was about controlling Sarah's paranoia so he could pursue whatever was keeping him away from home. And the most perfect low-risk way to do that was to use someone completely safe and professionally impeccable, Layla. I looked at Sarah. Her tears were silent now, and she was shaking her head slowly. "No, Mark. That's a lie, too. You didn't use Layla's name because I was paranoid. You used her name because she's a known quantity. Everyone here knows she's here until 2 a.m. You could tell me. I'm stuck on the Johnson file with Layla, and I couldn't possibly verify it because Layla is always here working." The way she said it, "Layla is always here working," it wasn't a compliment this time. It was a devastating indictment of my overcommitment. My dedication, the thing I prided myself on, had become the most effective tool for their deception. Mark had effectively been using my name as a get-out-of-jail-free card with his wife. Every single late night he was attributed to some critical, high-stakes coordination with me on a shared, phantom project. It created a perfect, verifiable alibi. Plausibility, he used technical terms, cross-divisional restructuring, international file, Q4 filings, that sounded legitimate in our audit world. Verifiability, partial Sarah knew I was a workaholic. If she happened to call the office or drive by, my car was often still there, my cube dark. He could easily say, "We moved to the 10th floor conference room," and she had no reason to doubt him because the central premise, I was working very late, was true. Risk mitigation. By involving me, an innocent third party, he was protecting himself from Sarah's suspicion being directed at him or his mistress, if there was one. If Sarah got suspicious about the long hours, she'd be suspicious of a supposed project, not his fidelity. He could easily blame the complexity of the audit or my imagined inefficiency. The bitterest part was realizing how much of Sarah's loyalty I had misunderstood. When she fiercely defended me to David or Tom in Section 4, she wasn't just being a good friend. She was rigorously vetting and establishing the cover story's credibility in the office. She was making sure that if anyone did question Mark's long hours, the office consensus would immediately swing to, "Oh, he must be working with Layla," and we all know Layla is obsessed with her job. She was acting as his chief enforcer of the lie. I looked at Mark, and all I felt was cold contempt. "You didn't just lie to your wife," I repeated, calmer this time. "You jeopardized my professional standing. If that rumor had escalated, if a partner had seriously looked into that special project you invented, I would have been associated with a massive professional fraud. And you did it because you knew I was too busy and too dedicated to ever notice I was being used." Mark opened his mouth, probably to try and throw out another deflection, but Sarah finally stood up straight. She looked at him with an expression that wasn't anger, but a profound, weary finality. The sight of her shattered faith was unbearable. She had spent months trying to maintain the integrity of a lie that was actively poisoning her and using her friend as collateral. And now, seeing the truth reflected in my eyes, she finally let go. The break room had transformed from a stage for a petty argument into the scene of a profound, agonizing implosion. The confrontation and Sarah's tears marked the definitive turning point. When Mark realized I wouldn't accept his excuse, that his lie was a serious professional liability and a personal betrayal, his defiance crumbled into defensiveness, and then quickly into anger directed solely at Sarah. "This is your fault, Sarah," he hissed, his voice finally losing all corporate polish and sounding raw with spite. "You couldn't keep a secret. You had to be so paranoid, constantly checking up on me, making me feel like I had to invent these stupid stories in the first place. He was trying to make her responsible for his infidelity, his deception, and now his exposure. It was a disgusting display, watching him sacrifice his wife's dignity in a desperate attempt to save his own skin. I stepped in immediately, not to defend Sarah's role in the cover-up, but to stop his bullying. Stop it, Mark. You are responsible for your choices. Layla's name didn't jump into your mouth. You put it there, and you kept it there because it worked. This has nothing to do with Sarah's paranoia and everything to do with your deceit. Mark turned his full, venomous glare on me. Stay out of this, Layla. This is between a husband and his wife. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have every idea. I shot back, keeping my voice level. I know that my 2 a.m. work ethic was your alibi. I know that you intercepted our lunch date because my genuine presence would have exposed your fictitious projects. You dragged me into your marriage, so I am involved. This was the critical moment. Sarah was completely broken. Her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that racked her entire body. She hadn't defended herself, and she hadn't defended him. She was finally seeing the man she loved, not as a victim of a stressful work culture, but as a callous liar who was willing to destroy her friendship and compromise my career just to maintain his double life. Then, she looked up, her eyes, magnified by the tears, fixed on mine. There was an ocean of apology in that look. She opened her mouth, but all that came out was a choking whisper. I'm so sorry, Layla. She couldn't finish the sentence. The guilt of her betrayal, the knowledge that she had used me, her friend, as a tool, was overwhelming her more than the collapse of her marriage seemed to. Mark, sensing his control rapidly slipping away, grabbed his jacket. Fine. If you want to believe her, Sarah, then believe her. I'm done with this. I'll be at... He stopped. He couldn't say the office anymore. He couldn't say Layla's cube. He had nowhere left to go. He just sneered at both of us, spat out a frustrated, "We'll talk later," and stormed out of the break room, slamming the door so hard that the vending machine shuddered. Now it was just Sarah and me. The silence was different this time. It was raw and heavy, but no longer laced with deception. It was just sorrow. Sarah's breakdown was agonizing to watch. She collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands, her sobs turning loud and uncontrollable. This wasn't just the grief of a wife. It was the pain of a friend who had lost her way, who had compromised her integrity and her most vital relationship at work. I walked over and knelt beside her. This was the moment of decision for me. I could be furious. I had every right to be. She had knowingly or unknowingly helped perpetuate a lie that involved my name. But looking at her, completely devastated, all I could feel was a deep, protective surge of pity and, honestly, the lingering affection of our genuine friendship. "Sarah," I said softly, "look at me." She slowly lowered her hands, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. "I heard you outside," I continued, choosing my words carefully. "I heard you tell him you were worried I would find out. Was this about me finding out about his late nights, or about me finding out that you were involved in the story?" She didn't hesitate. "Both," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I was terrified you'd find out I was letting him use you. I was scared I'd lose my only friend here. I wanted to believe him when he said it was the only way to get some space to get his work done." She shook her head, a painful, self-loathing gesture. "I knew it was wrong. But I loved him, Layla. I needed to believe it was just stress, not another woman." The turning point was complete. I chose not to unleash my anger. I chose our friendship. I chose to see her as a victim of his manipulation, even if she was a complicit one. I put my arm around her shaking shoulders. "It's okay," I said, knowing it wasn't, but needing to offer a small piece of comfort. "It's not your fault. He used us both. Now we need to figure out what to do next." The immediate priority after Mark stormed out was getting Sarah out of the office before anyone else stumbled into the emotional aftermath. I helped her gather her things, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't zip her bag. I told our supervising partner I was taking her home because she had a sudden, severe migraine, an excuse the firm accepted without question, because in busy season, any ailment related to the head is considered lethal. Once we were in my car, driving away from the office, away from the fluorescent lights and the heavy truth, We had to address the unraveling of the double life. Sarah was past the point of protecting him. The sheer relief of the truth being out, however painful, had broken the dam. "It wasn't just late nights, Layla," she started, her voice hollow. "I think it's been going on for over 6 months." She began to fill in the missing pieces, showing how Mark's meticulous use of my name was the cornerstone of a much wider pattern of betrayal. The lies weren't random, they were part of a schedule. "Remember a few months ago when I told you Mark had to fly to the Chicago office unexpectedly for an emergency audit on the Midwest division?" she asked. I nodded. I remembered Sarah was particularly stressed that week, claiming Mark's absence was making her double-check her own files. "He said he had to go because the partner specifically requested him, and that he and you were coordinating on the data transfer that whole weekend. He said you were the only one with the encryption keys for the files, and that you were remote checking everything from Chicago." My stomach churned. "I was home that weekend, Sarah. I was trying to relax and catching up on laundry. I never heard a word from him." She nodded sadly. "I know now. He wasn't in Chicago for the Midwest Division emergency audit. I checked his credit card statements a few weeks ago, just little things, trying to find proof for myself. He rented a car at the local airport and flew to Miami, and the hotel receipt was clearly for 2 people. He hadn't just used me for a few late nights. He had used my verifiable, workaholic image to cover an entire out-of-town affair. He leveraged the inherent secrecy and high-stakes nature of our work, the talk of encryption keys, remote access, and emergency travel, to create an alibi that was immune to questioning. Who would question a critical, high-level audit that supposedly involved 2 of the firm's most dedicated employees? Then she brought up the lunch date I remembered from Section 5. "The taco lunch, Layla," she said, wiping her face. "When Mark texted you, I was actually on the phone with him in the hallway. He didn't want me to leave the office. He was furious. He said, 'If you leave and you're seen with Layla, the whole afternoon schedule is ruined.' I told my client I was meeting Layla off-site to discuss the partnership structure." The lie was so layered, it was dizzying. Mark wasn't just lying to Sarah. He was lying to his mistress/client/whoever he was meeting, telling them he was with Layla too. He was running 2 simultaneous lies, using me as the central character in both narratives to make them believable. Sarah confessed that she had started actively looking for the truth a month ago when his stories became too outlandish. She started checking his texts, listening to his calls, and even doing her own quiet research. "I called the front desk of his old tax firm, just randomly," she admitted. "I asked about him just casually. They said he still swings by occasionally, but they had no idea what project he could be doing with the audit department. They thought I was asking about you." She had been in agony, torn between the need to believe her husband and the mounting evidence he was a complete fraud. Her fierce defense of him in the office wasn't just a cover. It was her desperately trying to convince herself that the official narrative, the one where Mark was a dedicated, work-obsessed professional working with his dedicated friend Layla, was the truth. The realization that his lies spanned different cities, different weekends, and different excuses, all linked back to my professional persona, was infuriating and frightening. He was a master manipulator, and I had been his perfect, unsuspecting pawn. The full weight of his betrayal was no longer just a confrontation in a break room. It was the total destruction of his life and, potentially, the fracturing of my professional reputation. The immediate fallout of Mark's dramatic exit left me with an excruciating ethical and personal dilemma, choosing silence and offering support. I was the holder of a truth that could not only destroy Mark's career but could also cause catastrophic personal and professional upheaval for Sarah and, by extension, me. As we drove, Sarah was beyond tears, moving into a state of stun, quiet calculation. She was already thinking about lawyers and separating their finances. The practical logistics of a life exploded. But she was terrified of the office fallout. "Layla," she said, her voice shaking but firming up slightly. "If this gets out, I mean the details, if people know he was lying about working on a project with you, and that project was a complete fabrication, the partners will freak out. It looks like you were involved in some kind of corporate cover-up, even if you weren't. We both know how they treat even the appearance of misconduct." She was absolutely right. In an audit firm, the perception of integrity is everything. The moment a partner learned that Mark had been fabricating multi-divisional, complex audit projects using my name as the co-signer, the firm's first reaction wouldn't be sympathy for Sarah or me. Their first reaction would be damage control, which often involves quietly sidelining anyone remotely associated with the scandal. I could find myself removed from key accounts, forced onto less glamorous projects, or worst of all, facing an internal ethics review. I had to choose between my instinct to expose Mark's disgusting behavior, to ensure he faced consequences for his professional misuse of my name, and protecting myself and Sarah from the firm's ruthless damage control measures. My choice was to support Sarah and enforce silence on the true, intricate details of the lie. "We stick to the narrative that he left," I told her, pulling over onto a quiet side street. "We don't mention the lie about my work. You tell the office that you found out he was having an affair, that you confronted him, and that he no longer works at his firm or lives at your house. That is the simple truth they can digest." Sarah looked at me, gratitude mixed with apprehension in her eyes. "But what about the rumors? What about all those late nights he blamed on you?" "We kill the rumors through denial, not explanation," I said. "If anyone asks about that special project with Mark, you tell them it was briefly considered but never materialized. I'll tell them the same thing. The important thing is that Mark is the villain and he's gone. We don't give them enough information to start poking holes in the professional side of the story." It felt like a calculated corporate maneuver, a decision worthy of a high-level executive. I was choosing self-preservation and protecting my friend over personal vindication. Mark's professional downfall would happen through Sarah's divorce lawyer, not through an internal firm investigation that might burn me in the process. I offered her my absolute personal support. "You stay with me tonight," I insisted. "You don't go home. I'll help you figure out the legal stuff tomorrow. Your job, your reputation, our friendship, we're saving all of that. We'll weather this together, just like we weather busy season." Her silent nod was a powerful moment of renewed connection. The betrayal was acknowledged, forgiven, and sealed over with a new layer of solidarity, one forged in the wreckage of her marriage. I was consciously sacrificing the satisfaction of seeing Mark publicly shamed for his professional deceit, but I was protecting my friend and my career. It was a trade-off that felt cold, necessary, and deeply mature. I was no longer the oblivious workaholic Layla. I was a protector and a survivor. I was no longer a pawn in their game. I was the strategist in ours. The fallout was messy, protracted, and exactly as controlled as we needed it to be. The new normal and lingering doubt settled over the office like a cold front. Sarah filed for divorce immediately. She told her direct superior a concise version of the truth. Mark had been cheating, and she was devastated, but she was going to focus on her work. She was visibly suffering, which, ironically, made her story completely believable. No one suspected the depths of the lie. Mark simply vanished from the professional orbit of our firm. The rumors about him and me, the phantom special project, were easily batted away with our coordinated denial that the project had ever truly taken off. "Oh, that was just an initial scope of work," I'd say, waving it off with a casual professionalism. It got scrapped when Mark changed firms. The office, predictably, circled Sarah with quiet sympathy. Mark, the perfect corporate spouse, was suddenly a notorious cheat, and he was quickly airbrushed out of the firm's history. The silence we chose worked. My professional standing remained intact, and Sarah was supported, not scrutinized. But our friendship, while salvaged, was permanently altered. It was a new normal, not the old, comfortable one. We were closer in some ways, bound by the explosive secret we shared, but there was a new, faint line of reserve between us. Sarah would occasionally catch my eye, and in that fleeting second, I could see the ghost of the betrayal, the guilt that she had let my name be dragged into the mud. I always offered a reassuring, quick smile, but the memory of her defending his lie was something I knew I'd never fully forget. The relationship was less about cozy coworker camaraderie and more about a deep, shared trust forged in crisis. We were two survivors with a pact of silence. The whole awful experience left me with a pervasive, lingering doubt, the thought that still keeps me up sometimes during late-night reviews. It's not about Mark's infidelity or Sarah's choices. It's about how thoroughly I was manipulated. How did I miss all those signs? I was so dedicated to my job, so focused on the spreadsheets and deadlines, that I didn't see I was being used as the perfect, unsuspecting alibi. My commitment, my reliability, my work ethic, the things I valued most, were the precise weapons Mark used against his wife. The unsettling question remains: how much more of my life, my reputation, or my actions have been silently leveraged by others for their own gain without my ever knowing? It taught me a chilling lesson. In the corporate world and in life, you need to be not just good at your job, but vigilant about how your image is perceived and used by others. I still work late, but now I don't just email a file. I think about who might be using that email as proof of their absence somewhere else. Mark is long gone, and Sarah is thriving, building a new, honest life. But I'll never look at a long night at the office the same way again. It's a constant, unnerving reminder that my life, my truth, was once nothing more than a convenient excuse for someone else's massive, complex lie. And the one thing that still makes me twitch is the thought of all the other lies Mark told that never needed to involve me. That quiet, unsettling thought is the true cost of their betrayal. If you liked the story, if you were totally shocked by how Layla's name was used in the cover-up, please hit the like button, subscribe to The Office Hours for more stories, and drop a comment below letting me know what Layla should have done differently.